Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope you're all doing well. It is a fine spring day here in Northern England. Happy Thursday, everybody. Talking about Kohberger today because there's another bunch of court filings that have come out. It's like, oh my God, how many times are the defense and the state going to reply to each other? Like, it's kind of ridiculous now. It's like the state's response to the defendant's reply to the blah, 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 blah. I mean, the titles are getting longer and longer and longer. So we're going to pick a few things out here, a couple of things that came out from the new stuff. And I did say, I don't know whether it was the last live stream I did or whether it was a video that I did. I said I was going to go over the stuff from the Elantra. So I'm going to go over some of that. But what I'm going to point out is that there's a lot of things in these filings that I think people are hyper-focusing on certain issues that are not that important, that won't be that important to the jury. I mean, you've got to remember that, you know, these documents that, you know, that are coming out, there's a lot of information in them. We're finding out a lot of stuff. And, you know, it's after months of not knowing very much. You know, with the gag order, we've gone a long time without really knowing a great deal more than what was in the PCA. So now we're getting a little bit of meat on the bones of that PCA, because the PCA is literally just the bones. It's the bare bones. It's just the probable cause, you know, to get someone arrested. And we're getting a little meat on the bones now. But I think some people are focusing too much on minutiae. And what I'm doing, given that there is a lot of information coming out, what I'm doing is looking at, well, what would be important to the jury? What would be important for the parties to put in front of the jury? You know, of course, all of these pre-trial hearings are all about what they're actually going to be allowed to present at trial. You know, much of this new stuff that's coming out are motions in limine. You know, one party or the other trying to get something allowed in to the jury or not allowed, to be excluded. So it's dead interesting. I think motions in limine are very interesting, regardless of the case. For me, anyway, I like this pre-trial phase. You find out a lot from the pre-trial phase. But you've got to remember that, well, I say you get a lot from the pre-trial phase. You only get a lot from the pre-trial phase if there's transparency in the case. So, you know, cases like Delphi, we didn't get very much in the pre-trial phase, did we? However, we are in this case now because of all of these filings. So you've got to remember that these filings they're not to give the public everything that either side might be privy to. So hyper-focusing on, I said this last time when I talked about the text messages between Dylan and Bethany, that you're only getting a handful of that information. You're only getting a little bit of the communication that those two young women were having, both with each other and with other people. So you don't have the context. You can't make anything from it. You can't accuse them. You can't say that there's any culpability or shadiness based on those text messages, because you don't get the context to anything that was going on. So that's what I mean about people focusing on the minutiae when we don't have the full story. And we may never have the full story because it's what the state decides to put in front of the jury. And then obviously when it's the defence's case, what they decide to use, how they decide to counter. So those kind of things, yeah, they're interesting. They're interesting to talk about and mull over, but you've just got to be firmly rooted in reality that this is only a very small amount of the information. It's only the information that's relevant to that particular motion that we are seeing. It feels like we're getting a lot at the moment, and we are, but it's only a fraction of what the parties are privy to. So let's just remember that. But also, let's remember, and it is related, it's a different issue, but it's related. Remember that the discovery is going to be huge in this case, but only a portion of that discovery is going to get put in front of the jury, because partly certain things will be excluded from the trial based on judges' decisions in this pre-trial phase, but also they won't include everything from the discovery. So even some of the stuff that we're seeing in these motions are not necessarily going to be presented at trial. Let's remember that as well, because this information that we're seeing here is for a specific reason. It's to either get a motion granted or get a motion denied. So each side are picking things from the discovery that backs up their argument. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything we see here is going to be presented to the jury. So the trial isn't going to be everything we know about everything. It's a very carefully crafted story that the state will put together. And then, obviously, the defence, if they choose to, they can put their version of events. Now, remember, the defence isn't obliged to prove anything. They don't have the burden of proof to prove that Bryan Kohberger is not guilty. It's the opposite. The state has the burden of proof to prove that he is guilty. The defence don't have to prove anything. However, given that the defence are being very rigorous in the minutiae that they're choosing to focus on, we're going to talk about some of that. I would imagine that they are going to be putting on a bunch of their own witnesses to disprove certain things that the state are going to allege, which is fine, which is great. It's all good stuff. So I'm glad that Kohberger is having, a rigorous defence, as he deserves, so that when he's convicted, there's going to be less grounds for appeal. I'm going to say a couple of hellos before we get going. So we are going to talk about a little bit on the autism as well, just a little bit. There's a new filing on that. So it's mainly going to be the Elantra. I'll do that last. A little bit on the autism, and the Balaclava. I'll cover this. And this is another thing. The Balaclava made me smile, because all the news outlets have gone with the Balaclava. The Balaclava news, that he bought a Balaclava. To me, I don't care whether he bought a Balaclava. So what? So there's that. All right. But I'm going to say a couple of hellos. Hello, Leslie. I'm glad you worked out that we weren't talking about Madeline Soto. Hi, Ozzy. And we've got Jack. Maybe. Yeah, maybe you had to use like Velcro, those shoes that have Velcro fasteners for kids, rather than shoelaces. Maybe shoelaces proved difficult for him. Maybe they did. All right, a lot of kids find shoelaces difficult. But yeah. All right. Hello, Angie baby. Pre-C, 8:30 a.m. Want to eat gyros? I don't even know what gyros are. No idea what gyros are. We've got Emosland. Oh, you've been unlucky retirings. Oh, yeah. I hardly ever get to watch live streams live. I either watch them day after because it happened overnight my time, or I've caught part of it, but I'm playing catch up. Hello, Sophie, and we've got Casey Marie, we've got Mike, we've got Jackie from a very hot South Africa. Oh dear, it's just right here, just nice weather. It's not too hot, but it's not cold. It's perfect weather outside. We got Mandy down under with love. Good day, good day. We've got BGOG, CW. Going to Manchester. Bad passenger. True Crime Snoopy, top of the morning to you. Well, top of the afternoon for me. Got Petunia. What else have we got? Can I get down the bottom of the chart? I don't think so. We got Tammy, Kelly, Cold Hearted Biatch, RJ, Karen, Dawn, Lisa. All right. Okay. Let's get going. Let me make this screen a bit bigger for you. All right, so these are all the new filings. Those are the ones that have come out in the last couple of days. There's a bunch more that don't even register as new. I do like this new system, though, because it flags up what's new, and it's all in order, and they've got nice titles. You know exactly what you're clicking on. I do like it. I love it. I love it, in fact. But anyway, we're going to start with the Balaclava. Ooh, all the news has gone with this. Ashley Banfield was chomping at the bit. She was in her little segment on News Nation. I don't know whether you watched it. I'm not going to play it, but talking to Brian Enton, it's like, oh, we bought a Balaclava. Boom. Well, look. He bought a Balaclava in the middle of winter in Pennsylvania. So it's pretty cold, isn't it? Pennsylvania in January. So maybe he bought a Balaclava because he was cold. Maybe. But they do have the receipt. Dick's Sporting Goods, record of sale. The relevance of this information is that Bryan Kohberger purchased a black Balaclava from Dick's Sporting Goods on January 10th, 2022. I mean, look, it's like 10 months before the murders. And it's the middle of winter. So, yeah, it may be the Balaclava that DM saw. Or it might not be. He might just have bought a Balaclava because it was cold. I don't know. What do you think? Now, look, I mean, they could say, well, he no longer has the Balaclava. So that must be the murder. You know, that he's discarded it. Like, we couldn't find the Balaclava amongst his belongings, either at his apartment in Washington or at his bedroom in Pennsylvania. Therefore, that Balaclava, with it being missing, maybe it's the one that he used. Maybe it is the one that he used and discarded. Maybe. However, listen, I've got loads of like hats, scarves, gloves, the amount of things that I've bought, and they don't last very long. Either I lose them, I leave them, I've used them as dog training and they get bashed up. Look, these kind of items, they're very easy to mislay. So I don't think it's really good evidence. It's interesting. Let's put it this way. It's interesting. Is it something that they're going to make a massive big point of at the trial? No. They might mention it, but it'll be a sentence. But it's not very newsworthy. I do think this is an interesting little file, and there's a few things in here that we'll just pick up on. So this is to do with the authentication of records. So it looks huge, like 70 pages, but a lot of it is just things like receipts and, you know, certificates of authentication and things like that. So things like surveillance footage, they've got the authentication for, which we're going to talk about in a little while. Well, we're going to talk about the surveillance footage in a little while. So they've just got the authentication, and then when we get onto the FBI investigation into this surveillance footage, because this is an FBI report, you see that they have checked, like the cameras are accurate to local time, or the cameras are a little bit slow or a little bit fast or whatever. So there's a bunch of certificates of authentication for various things. So that's useful. It's stuff that the jury ain't going to hear about unless the defense start, questioning, well, how do you know that this is accurate? How do you know this, that, and the third? Well, they've got all that information. So it's good that they've got all that information. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to know that this was thorough. This was thoroughly done. Unlike some cases, Delphi, where you've got no idea. You've got no idea about the investigation. Like there's no evidence, there's no information, there's no clarification. This is way different than a case like Delphi. So just to have all of this information, I think is useful. So loads of surveillance stuff. Then we've got purchasing history, certificate of authenticity for Amazon. So obviously that's relevant because he bought the K-bar knife from Amazon. I'm still waiting to hear about information about the shower curtain. I want to know. I want to know about the shower curtain. The shower curtain that the defense mentioned in a filing. It was the filing on, we talked about it in the last live stream, the filing on his OCD. They just dropped in that he has to change his shower curtain frequently because he's OCD and he's like nervous about mold. And that might be true. You might change your shower curtain often because they do collect gunk, don't they? They do tend to get a bit moldy, shower curtains. And yeah, you might change them, or you might have two. And then, while one's being washed, you've got the other one. But I still think that somewhere in the records there is evidence of Bryan Kohberger buying multiple shower curtains. I think that he used shower curtains to cover his car inside so that he wouldn't get any blood or any victim DNA or anything. And then he was able to just remove all that somewhere in his journey, either his journey that night when he went south or the following afternoon. Well, it wasn't the following afternoon, same day, but that afternoon. He went way south, all the way down to the Snake River. And you can see here from Albertsons. Now, we've known about this from the jump. We've known about this because it's in the PCA. But Albertsons grocery store in Clarkston, Washington. 12:46 p.m. to 1:06 p.m. shows the defendant's vehicle and actions hours after the homicides. The state's in the process of obtaining. Also, they've not got the certificate of authenticity yet, but they're in the process of getting it. What else have we got? Okay, so we talked about that. Phone stuff. Now, his phone isn't, in my opinion, his phone really isn't relevant. I mean, look, his phone data, because his phone was off at the time of the murders, so his phone was on when he left his house, so you got some track of his phone and his vehicle moving together, but then his phone goes off and then doesn't come back on until after the murders, and then it starts pinging off towers like south of Moscow, and he does like this loop. So he goes south, and then he does like this U shape, and then goes back up. So he's pinging off various towers on this route south. Now there's no surveillance; it's like really, really remote around there. Like, that's the places where he goes stargazing. So that's his alibi. So he went south. He's going to admit that he went south because his phone was pinging down there. And he's going to say he was stargazing on a cloudy night. He was stargazing on a cloudy night. Okay. All right. Any stargazers in the house? I'm a stargazer. And if you want to go out at night looking at the stars and it's cloudy, what are you going to see? Well, you ain't going to see stars. Let's put it that way. Unless someone punches you over the head and knocks you out, then you might see stars, but not the kind of stars that you're liking to see. So, yeah, he was south, but didn't see anything, did he? No. If you're a stargazer, the first thing you do when you're planning to go out at night, doing your stargazing, the first thing you do is you look up in the sky before you set off and you think, oh, it's cloudy. I'm not going to do it tonight. All right. So that's his alibi. Stargazing on a cloudy night. But anyway, yeah. So in relation to the murders themselves, the phone isn't relevant because his phone was off. But it gives us a little glimpse into how far south he went. But phone ping data, pinging off towers in a remote area, problems with triangulation. I don't care what route he took. This is the thing. These things to me, yeah, they're interesting. It's like when the PCA came out, it's like, oh, look, he tried to be sneaky. Oh, look, he tried to take the long route home. Yeah, it's interesting. But how relevant is it for the jury? Not that it's relevant, but it's not going to occupy a large amount of words at the trial, in my opinion. Like, they're going to show his phone ping data. They're going to show the towers that he pinged off. They're going to show that. They're going to show the route. But so what? If I was a juror, I wouldn't be interested. All right, he took the long route home. And it makes sense that he did that. Like, trying to, I don't know, throw the cops off. Or, I think, as a lot of people do, he went south into a remote area to get rid of the evidence, to get rid of the shower curtains, to get rid of his clothes, to get rid of the murder weapon. So, I don't care what route he took. Like, you know, people are, this is one of the pieces of minutiae that people are really hyper-focusing on and have been doing since PCA came out. It doesn't matter what route he took. It doesn't matter whether he went all the way south to the Snake River and then took to, started to go back north again, or whether he took there is like a route that you can take kind of across to Uniontown, and that's not quite as south as going all the way down to the river. Okay, whichever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. It would matter if, you know, they were trying to find this evidence. If they were, and I'm sure they tried. I'm sure they followed the routes that his phone took them to see whether there was, you know, any disturbed earth at the side of the road or anything like that, anything dumped. But it's a vast area. I mean, you know, he could have walked into, you know, he could walk 200 yards off the road. He could have walked a mile off the road. We don't know. Or he could have just dumped everything in the river. You're never going to find it. Never going to find it. So it's relevant for that reason, but that calls for speculation. So rightfully, if the state started to say, oh, well, you know, he took this route south and we think it was to discard of all the items that we didn't find, well, the defense has got a perfectly legitimate objection, calls for speculation, because of course it does. Of course it does. So things like that, what route he took home, not going to occupy a great deal of time at trial. For me, if I was a juror, I would need to be absolutely sure. They would have to convince me that it was him in his car. So is it his car immediately outside of 1122 King Road. I don't care what route he took, like to get there or to go home. I can accept that he probably took the long route home to discard stuff. I could accept that, but there's no proof of that at all. That does call for speculation. So let's stick to the facts we know. And as a juror, I would want to know, is that his car outside? Is that his DNA inside? Those are the two things that would convince me that Bryan Kohberger was the killer. And I do think the state have enough. I do. So more surveillance, bank records, and there's a bunch of stuff that the state's not going to use now. So for the surviving roommates and for the murder victims, they're not going to be using things like bank records and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of stuff like Corner Club. This is just to prove that where Maddie and Kaylee were. So a lot of this is for timeline. So for, yep, Maddie and Kaylee were at the Corner Club. They were at the Grub Truck. Oh, this is the one where Costco in Clarkston. It's caught on camera there. There's university stuff. There's the Balaclava. DoorDash. Now, DoorDash. I was hoping that the DoorDash driver who arrived at 3:59, I was hoping that the DoorDash driver might have seen him, either while she was driving there or driving away. But it doesn't appear so. Unless that's one of the things that we're going to find out at trial, because it's, you know, it's not been relevant to put into a filing. Because the DoorDashers, you know, they have dash cam, don't they? So I was hoping that the DoorDash driver would get him on dash cam, but we've not heard that yet. But again, this is for timeline. That it's absolutely true. It corroborates the timeline that Xana did get DoorDash at 3:59. So there's a bunch of stuff that they're not planning to use. Crypto.com, financial records. Interesting. Grub Truck. So again, that's just for timeline. So all this bank stuff. So they'll have, like, I bet they've gone through every single purchase that he made. For I mean, the fact that they found the Balaclava that had been purchased on January 10th, so nearly a year before the murders, the fact that they found that, you know, there's been some pretty intense investigation going on. And that's good. It's good to know that it's been thorough. So there's a bunch of stuff that they don't plan to use. So that was him coming home. So TikTok use for Xana. TikTok application at approximately 3:16 a.m. State is in process of. So that's interesting. I think, again, that's going to be timeline that she was on TikTok before DoorDash, and then she was on TikTok, I think, till 4:12. So, I mean, look, the TikTok might have just been playing while she was eating her DoorDash, and may have been playing when everyone else was being murdered. Maybe Xana was murdered last. I've always thought Xana was murdered last. But I think it was Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and then Xana. That's my opinion. Is there a CCTV request for the pet store? The pet store. Do you know the name of the pet store? Pet store where? I don't think they've got everything in here. They might have. Look, Under Armour. But they're not going to use that. So the clothes that he wore during the murders, they don't think come from Under Armour. Verizon. So that's Timeline. Don't need more. Walmart. Vehicle registration. More bank records. He's got a bunch of bank accounts. I think the bank records for the victims, they've no need to use those. Like, there's nothing relevant because it's not like there was payments to or from Bryan Kohberger. It's not like there were, they'd be looking for all sorts of connections with possible perpetrators. So, but as a juror, and I have been a juror, and you listen to days and days and days of testimony, and you think, right, how is this relevant? It's interesting. It's a timeline issue. Okay, cool. I can accept that. What I need to know is, did this person who is on trial, did they have the means, the opportunity to commit this murder? So the surveillance footage of a white car close to 1122 King Road, is that consistent with Bryan Kohberger's car? And is there evidence of Bryan Kohberger in the house at the crime scene? Those are the two ticks for me. Those are the things that are difficult. They're difficult for the defense to jump over. Everything else is interesting. Yes, it adds to the picture. It adds to the. You've got a solid timeline. They've almost got a minute by minute timeline. So that's good, that we know when these murders occurred. We know almost to the minute when these murders occurred. And that's consistent with a white vehicle that looks very much like an Elantra to me, being in very close proximity of the crime scene. But it's the DNA. If they didn't have the DNA, I would be a lot more willing to think, well, look, a lot of people have got white cars. What if it's someone else with a white car just driving around? What if it's someone joyriding, bought a new car and is going out when it's quiet to, get used to it? I will be much less convinced about the connection with Bryan Kohberger. So if I was a juror, I then have to ask myself, would I convict him based on just DNA? on the knife sheath? That would be my question to myself. Would I be prepared to convict him based on just the DNA on the knife sheath? Because everything else is pretty circumstantial. Well, it's all circumstantial, but it's easily doubtable. It's building up a picture. Let's be very clear. It's building up a picture that each little piece, you know, it's like putting a jigsaw together. Each little piece adds a little bit more, but it nowhere near tells the whole picture. So if they didn't have that DNA, I would struggle. I would struggle, because I would be able to find out. I'd be able to say, well, look, yeah, it's a white car. Yeah, it looks like an Elantra, but so what? White is one of the most popular colour for cars. It could be someone just joyriding. It could be someone completely unconnected with Bryan Kohberger. It could be somebody who isn't even connected to the murders. Just someone driving around just for the fun of it, you know, with a young person with a new car and whatever. Those are the kind of questions that I would need reassurance on if I was a juror in this case. But the fact that they've got the white car, plus they've also got DNA from Bryan Kohberger, that adds a lot. You know, because you've got all these little tiny puzzle pieces. Each one of them doesn't give a lot. But then you've got the DNA, which fills in a bunch of puzzle pieces. It fills in a whole, you know, part of that picture. And then with everything else added around it, you've got almost a complete picture. Not quite, but you've almost got a complete picture. And then you've got the witness, Dylan, and her coming face to face with a man with bushy eyebrows. Now, look, she can't identify him. She's very clear. Like the information that we've seen from the police interviews, she's very clear that she doesn't see, she's not able to identify him from, you know, pictures of him on the news. She's not being able to identify him from his mugshot. All she remembers is bushy eyebrows and a black, like, ski mask, balaclava type thing. So, I'm wearing black. Well, yeah, she's come face to face with the killer, but has she come face to face with Bryan Kohberger? So again, the fact that Bryan has got bushy-ish eyebrows, that on its own would be nothing. Like, if I was a juror, that would mean nothing, because whether or not he's got bushy eyebrows is somewhat subjective. She can't identify him. So that on its own would mean nothing. It's just one tiny puzzle piece, that's all. Without DNA, it's nothing. Without DNA, it doesn't tell us anything. But with the DNA, okay, we've got a guy who broadly matches Kohberger's description, like skinny, about 6 foot, with bushy eyebrows, white male. Okay. It's not inconsistent, is it? It's not, none of it is inconsistent. Like if she'd said, oh, well, the man that I saw was 5'4" and, you know, was you know, quite portly. Well, that's not Bryan Kohberger, is it? Everyone would start blaming Richard Allen. But it's not inconsistent. If her description was inconsistent, then I'd have a problem. I'd be like, well, how come his DNA is in the bedroom of 2 of the murder victims on the knife sheath, the sheath that belongs to the murder weapon? How come the description from Dylan does not match Bryan Kohberger? it's not that would then exclude Bryan Kohberger, because the description is less important than the DNA. The DNA is way more important than someone's description of, someone that you see in the dark who's wearing all black and has got the vast majority of their face covered, and you just literally see their eyes and their eyebrows. But if the height, the weight, if the overall picture of that person was really, did not match Bryan Kohberger at all, then if I was a juror, I couldn't exclude Bryan Kohberger based on Dylan's description because of the DNA. But what I would be thinking is, well, there's two people. Like, they might have got one of them, but there's another person. And the person that Dylan saw is not Bryan Kohberger. The person that Dylan saw is an accomplice. But the fact that everything is, consistent, it does put those little pieces together. What has the roommates lied about? They've not lied about anything. People have said they've lied, but they've not. Look, we don't know what they've said. We don't know what they've told the cops. All we know is what we've been told from these filings. So, all right, I'll come back to the Elantra. I'll do the autism one next. This is only 7 pages. So this is the state's response, dear God, the state's response to the defendant's response to the state's motion in limine regarding the neuropsychological and psychiatric evidence. So in the last live stream, I read through some portions of the defense's response, and there was an expert, Dr. Lewin, who they got an affidavit from and a report from. And Dr. Lewin is a neuroscientist. So they got Dr. Lewin to say that Bryan Kohberger actually only has level 1 autism, so it's mild, on the mild end of the spectrum. Like, in my opinion, Dr. Lewin's testimony in that filing doesn't help them. It really doesn't help them. He's not severely autistic. Yes, he has OCD. I don't think any of us can doubt that. And then this movement disorder that he's got, like dyspraxia type disorder that he's got, well, that's only mild also. That's only mild also. So this is the state's response. It is only 7 pages, so I'm going to read it in its entirety. Comes now the state of Indiana. No, not Indiana. I did it. Do you hear me? I did it. I've been so good lately, not confusing Idaho with Indiana, but I did it just there. I did it just there. Comes now the state of Idaho. By and through the Latah County Prosecuting Attorney submits the following reply to the March 17th, 2025 defendant's response to state's motion in limine regarding the neuropsychological and psychiatric evidence. The defendant, in his response to the state's motion in limine, has clarified that he apparently has at least 2 separate purposes for the proposed evidence. Yeah, he's got I don't know what the fancy term is. The term that I'm familiar with is dyspraxia, but they've given it a fancy term. So basically, someone who's clumsy, has got problems with fine motor skills, so not very good at threading needles, not very good at doing things that require, very steady movement, steady. Like, he wouldn't make a very good surgeon, probably wouldn't make a very good, bomb disposal person. that needs really fine motor skills. So we're pretty glad that Bryan didn't go into surgery and isn't a bomb disposal officer. But other than that, it doesn't affect him at all. Like I said, Dr. Lewin's testimony in that filing wasn't that convincing to me. I don't know how the defence is gonna use it. Developmental coordination disorder. Thank you. Yes, he's got problems with fine motor skills. All right. So the defence are arguing that he couldn't possibly have committed the murders because he had to walk. He had to walk from the car into the house, murder 4 people, and then walk back to his car, taking off his clothes, which would have blood on them, and then driving away. Can't possibly have done that because he's got this developmental coordination disorder. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. We went through it in detail in my last live stream, so go and check that out if you missed it. We're not going to reopen it. This is the state's reply, and it's a perfect reply. It's exactly the reply that I would have given. The defendant, in his response to the state's motion in limine, has clarified that he has apparently 2 separate purposes for the proposed evidence: to explain how the defendant appears before a jury and to rebut what the defendant anticipates may be evidence from the state regarding suspicious, unusual, or other odd, the state's characterization, physical and social behaviour. The defendant has now also included a declaration by Dr. Jeffrey Lewin regarding physical conditions of the defendant. This is the first the state has heard about Dr. Lewin. He was not included in the defendant's guilt phase expert disclosures. No, he wasn't. That's a very good point. I missed that. Yeah, the 2 psychiatrists or psychologists, I think. There's Dr. Orr, and then there's another one. Two psychologists. They were the experts that the defence put forward to challenge the death penalty, like saying that he can't have the death penalty because he's autistic. So Dr. Lewin has literally just popped up out of nowhere because it's the first any of us heard about Dr. Lewin from the last filing. Originally, the filing that kicked all this off was the defence saying, well, you can't impose the death penalty on him. It's cruel and unusual because he's autistic, which is nonsense, which is absolute nonsense. But we've discussed all that in the past. All right, so the state had never heard of Dr. Lewin, not included in the defendant's guilt phase expert disclosures, nor does he appear to offer anything in rebuttal to proffered expert disclosures from the state. Exactly. It's not helpful to the defence. Dr. Lewin's report is not helpful to the defence. First, addressing the issue of the defendant's behaviours and appearance as they may be perceived by the jury. The defence offers no authority, statutory or otherwise, to allow him to present evidence purportedly explaining how he may appear or behave in front of a jury. The state is unaware of any such authority. While Idaho Code 18207 does allow for the admission of certain mental condition evidence, not even that statute contemplates the defendant offering evidence of the defendant's behaviours and appearance, much less offering evidence before even the state's case in chief begins, or presumptively trying to follow the defendant's argument prior to jury selection beginning. Oh dear. Oh dear. Not only would this type of evidence be completely irrelevant and immaterial to the legal and factual issues in this case, whether the defendant committed 4 murders and burglary, it would be more likely to confuse the issues, mislead the jury, and play to the jury's sympathies. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with the defence trying to confuse a jury. Surely that's one of their jobs. But it has to be done in a way that is material to the case. So the fact that Bryan Kohberger has got autism it's not relevant to the case. As I keep saying, go back and watch my previous videos. when the very first mention of Bryan Kohberger's autism came out, I said it's not relevant. I said it. I said it's not relevant. It's not relevant. It's not relevant to the punishment phase, because autism, like a mild autism, it's not a mental health condition that makes you insane. You know exactly what you're doing. You know right from wrong. It doesn't make you incompetent to run your own life and to plan murders. It's not relevant. Why bring it up? It's not relevant. And then people countered to me in my comments saying, well, no, it's because Anne Taylor's talking about the punishment there. She's talking about if Bryan Kohberger's convicted, then he shouldn't get the death penalty because of his autism. But no, yes, that was one of the purposes of that original filing, but it wasn't the only purpose, because the way it was written was actually talking about the guilt phase as well as the punishment phase. So it was clear that Anne Taylor was trying to use Bryan Kohberger's autism in a way to persuade the jury that Bryan couldn't possibly have done these murders because he's got autism, OCD, and coordination disorder. That's nonsense. None of that's relevant. None of it is relevant. So I don't mind the fact that the defense is rigorous and they want to play to jury sympathies. Juries can see straight through that kind of thing. I don't mind that. I don't mind them putting on evidence that might confuse the jury, because surely that's, bringing reasonable doubt into the case. However, what I do oppose is them bringing stuff in that isn't relevant. And Bryan Kohberger's autism is not relevant. His OCD is not relevant. Actually, it might make him a better killer. In fact, let's be controversial. He's so used to being meticulously clean. He's so used to, germs and everything. Then it makes it's easier for him to act, to clean his clothes, his car, and to ensure that he doesn't leave any evidence. It actually makes it more likely for him to be the killer, not less likely, in my opinion. Not that people with OCD go committing murders. I'm just saying for him personally. He's used to wearing gloves. He's used to being meticulous. He's used to being very careful with what he does. So it doesn't matter. It's not relevant. That's my point. Does she ever read any defense docs? Yes, she does. Yes, she does. She covers both sides, does Michelle. Michelle is very good at covering both sides. And if you had watched my previous live streams and watched my videos, you would know that I've talked extensively about the defense filings. And you would know that I cover both sides of every case that I cover. So I think you may want to go and check out a bunch of my previous work. Just so you know. Just so you know. Yeah, you could call him a perfectionist, I guess. I guess you could call it that. So I bet he's kicking himself. I bet he's really mad that he forgot about that little speck of DNA on the knife sheath. I bet he's kicking himself. All right, the state notes that ICJI 202, don't know what that is, lists the evidence a jury is allowed to consider: sworn testimony of witnesses, exhibits which have been admitted into evidence, and facts to which the parties have stipulated. The defendant's demeanour and appearance are not included. As stated above, the state is unaware of any authority that would allow the defendant to present evidence purportedly explaining how he may appear or behave in front of the jury. There is, however, a body of law regarding prosecutorial misconduct holding that a defendant's courtroom behaviour off the witness stand was legally irrelevant to the case of his guilt. Yeah, like I said, it's not relevant. Let's talk about the evidence that is material to the case, because the line of nonsense that the defense went down about Bryan and his glare that he does and his problems with eye contact and the fact that he's not emotional, like he keeps a poker face, the fact that he doesn't move very much, all of those things, the defense somehow wanted to inform the jury that it wasn't because he was an unemotional, like lacking in empathy psychopath, it was because he was autistic. Well, it might well be because he's autistic, but it's not relevant. It's never been relevant. Those kind of things are never relevant to the case. So to bring those up in front of the jury, it's not a matter of confusing them. It's a matter that it's not relevant. Not relevant. Okay. And if the prosecutors can't use it, then surely the defense shouldn't be able to use it. The prosecution can't come along and say, look at them, they're behaving really shifty. Look at their eyes. Look at the way that they behave in front of you. They can't make a point of that. You know, if they could, then I'm sure they would. You know, the fact that Leilani Simon was, if you watched the Leilani Simon trial, the fact that she was mouthing abusive words to some of the witnesses, I'm sure the prosecutors could have brought that up to the jury if they were allowed to. Letitia Stokes was making gestures and stuff during her trial. And did the prosecutor bring it up? No, because they're not allowed to. They can speak to the judge privately, but not in front of the jury. So if the prosecutors can't use it, then the defense can't use it either. The defense can't use it either. So this analysis further supports the conclusion that a defendant's appearance or behaviour in front of a jury, at least when he is not testifying, is irrelevant and not evidence. Thank you. Defendant cites State versus Samuel from 2019, apparently in support of his request to offer explanation for what he believes the jury will perceive from his physical appearance and behaviours in court. However, State versus Samuel dealt with evidence of mental condition as it related to whether defendant knowingly, voluntarily, intelligently waived his Miranda rights in speaking with law enforcement. So very different. So the argument in Samuel seemed to be one that, was he capable? Like, did his mental condition prevent him from understanding his Miranda rights? That's the question. There's no question about that in this case. There's no question, absolutely no question, that Bryan Kohberger understands things like Miranda rights, that Bryan Kohberger understands the process of law, that he understands he's not insane, he's not incompetent to stand trial. He understands what's going on. He understood what was going on when he was arrested. So he understood his Miranda rights. The defense haven't questioned any of that. What the defense are using is this Samuel case to try to say, well, you know, we've got a precedent here in Samuel that it was relevant. and the behaviours of the defendant are relevant, and we need to tell the jury that, you know, if you see him glaring, or you see him emotionless, or you see him staring, it's because he's autistic, not because he's a weirdo. No, you can't bring it up. You've got to allow the jury to form their own decisions about the defendant. And any behaviour that they display, whether or not they think it's relevant. I would argue it isn't. I would argue it isn't relevant. But they can't preempt what the jury might think, because it's not allowed. It's not relevant. When the defendant opposed the state's request for an independent mental evaluation. Oh, really? Did they? Oh, I didn't know that. So the defendant opposed the state's request for an independent mental evaluation. So how were they allowed? How were they allowed to take Bryan Kohberger to see 2 psychologists and a neuroscientist? Why were they allowed to independently assess Bryan Kohberger's diagnoses? And it turns out that he's got autism, OCD, developmental coordination disorder, depression, and I think he's got anxiety. Well, he has, because OCD is an anxiety disorder. So his conditions do not make him mentally incompetent. His conditions do not make him insane. His decisions don't make him incompetent to stand trial. His conditions do not affect his ability to stand trial in any way, and nor did they affect his ability to commit the murders that he committed, in my opinion, allegedly. When the defendant opposed the state's request for an independent mental evaluation, the defendant tried to argue that Idaho Code 18207-4 was limited to mental conditions as they relate to elements of the charged offences. Oh! So they used the law to say, well, Bryan Kohberger's mental state is not relevant to the murders, so therefore you can't have him tested. But yet they could, and then use the results of that to somehow make him not the murderer, somehow make him less culpable if he gets convicted. No, until I said, when last live stream, when I read a bunch of defense motions. So for the person who, I didn't catch your name, but the person who said, does Michelle ever read defense filings? Yes, Michelle does. Michelle reads long defense filings. So when I went through those defense filings, and I said, Ann Taylor is, she thinks she's clever. She thinks she's clever, and she probably is, but she's not as clever as she thinks she is. She thinks she's some freaking genius, and you can see straight through it, and she's done it again and again and again and again. She shoots herself in the foot. I don't know how she even walks into court. She shot herself in the foot that many times, but then again, that's just my opinion. I just say what I see. All right. Where were we? All right. The Idaho Supreme Court held otherwise. What's more important is Samuel does not stand for the proposition that expert or any other testimony regarding how a defendant may appear in front of a jury is admissible. The defendant's appearance and behaviours in front of a jury are not material or relevant. Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad someone knows the law. It appears that the defendant, despite his initial declarations that he does not intend to offer this evidence under Idaho Code 18207, is now trying to claim that it's admissible under Idaho Code 18207. Make this make sense. She has to be clever. Being clever is her clause. I'm sure she's clever enough to pass the bar, right? But she's not as clever as she thinks she is. Or else she wouldn't be shooting herself in the foot time and time again. And she shot herself in the foot, right? Like I said, go back and listen to what I said in my last few videos about this case. I said she's shooting herself in the foot time and time again and bringing up this stuff about autism and about his health. She's shot herself in the foot because it allows the state to come right in and with very, very relevant legal arguments. Legal arguments. Dear God. So bringing up autism, bringing up what she was calling mental defects at first. I'm glad she changed that wording. I mean, she was using mental defect to explain autism in one of the filings. It was absolutely disgusting. But she sorted that out and then clarified that autism is a physical condition, not a mental condition. So I'm glad she got that clarified. However, in bringing it up at all, using these arguments, she has fed Bryan Kohberger to the state on a platter. Those were the words I used. Go and look it up. She has fed Bryan Kohberger to the state on a silver platter with cherries on top. That's what she's done. And for all you pro-burgers, I'm sorry, the defence that you think are absolutely wonderful has served Bryan Kohberger up to the state. And I don't know whether they even know it. But that's exactly what they've done. And this kind of filing shows me that I was right in that argumentation. The defence can't have it both ways. Exactly. Either Idaho Code 18207 applies and the evidence is limited to mental condition as it relates to legal or factual issue, or it does not apply, in which event the evidence is irrelevant and not admissible. I think that she realised using the mental health issue, the words mental defect is going to be the wrong one. So she changed it to argue that, well, autism is actually a physical condition, not a mental condition. So I'm glad she clarified that because she's right, but it still does not preclude him from getting the death penalty because Dr. Lewin says that Bryan is only got mild autism, only level 1. He's only mildly autistic, right? He doesn't have problems with intellect. He's not got intellectual challenging anyway. He's not got learning disability. His IQ is higher than average, not as high as mine, but it's higher than average. And you know, it's insane what she's done. So all you pro-burgers, you need to be getting on to Ann Taylor and saying that just how badly she's handling this case. Not that I all want you to go and email Ann Taylor. Please do not. Please do not. But metaphorically, you should be screaming in your heads and to your computers that Ann Taylor is making an absolute hash of this case. She's making a hash of it. And at this point, it's laughable. At this point, it's laughable. I'm not saying she's not being rigorous. I'm not saying she isn't trying. She is absolutely trying. So 10 out of 10 for effort. But I'm sorry. Effort is absolutely pointless when you are feeding your client to the opposite party on a silver platter with cherries on his head. Sorry. All right. The defendant asserts that, mind you, though, I mean, look, she's not got a lot to play with here. She's trying her best with a case where there's way more evidence against Kohberger than you find in other cases. So she's trying with the little that she's got available. She's trying everything. And obviously the judge is seeing through it because there's no legal basis for these challenges that she's doing, but she's not got any real choice. You know, she has to use this stuff because Kohberger, for whatever reason, is decided to plead not guilty. for whatever reason when the evidence is stacked against him. I don't understand, but there you go. That's the way it is. Maybe if he doesn't want the death penalty, maybe he should just plead, not put their families through the trauma of a trial. Even though I think the Gonzalez fan, I think they want the trial, to get all the evidence. But yeah, what can you do? The Quiet Observer, member for 10 months. Totally agree. Anne's made Bryan sound good. Yeah, she has. Absolutely. She has. With all this nitpicking that she's been doing. But like I said, she's not got a lot to play with. Because the defendant is guilty. That's what the evidence suggests anyway. All right. The defendant asserts that the second purpose of the defendant's proffer of the mental condition evidence is to rebut anticipated state's evidence about the defendant interacting with others, his personal hygiene habits, and so forth. At the outset, the state currently does not have any intention of offering evidence during the guilt phase of defendant's pattern of odd behaviour, such as social miscues with co-workers, professors, students, and others. And we've heard about all of these things. We've heard about them from students. We've heard about them from... we know that he was having problems with professors. I think he got fired just before his arrest. Didn't he get fired as a teaching assistant, if I remember that rightly? The state understands that were it to offer such evidence in rebuttal, the defence would likely be entitled to offer evidence that those behaviours stemmed from his OCD and ASD. So obsessive compulsive disorder. In Bryan, it's obsessive hand washing. He's got a fear of germs. He's got a fear things are going to go in his eyes. He's got a fear of mold. He's got a fear of, it's obsessive compulsive related to cleaning. And then autism spectrum disorder. But he's level 1. He's only mild. He's not profoundly autistic. He's not non-verbal. He's not got a lack of understanding of the world. No. He's no more autistic than I am. Let's put it that way. As opposed to some nefarious purpose. Defendant argues he has a developmental coordination disorder. This is the most laughable. This is hilarious, this. Given that Bryan Kohberger, wasn't he an army cadet when he was a teenager? Have I remembered that rightly? And I may have not remembered that rightly. So don't quote me on that, but I'm sure he was doing stuff to do with. He's been a runner. He did boxing at one point. So this is absolutely laughable. This is laughable because the defence's motion made it sound like Bryan could hardly walk. Made it sound like Bryan would struggle to walk the few yards from where he parked down the side of 1122 King Road and then into the house, murder 4 people, and then come out and walk the few yards back. Made it sound like he was practically in a wheelchair by the way that they were making it sound. But no. All right, so this is laughable. Defendant argues he has a developmental coordination disorder. That means it was not possible for him to commit these crimes because he lacked the necessary speed and coordination. But that is not what his neuropsychological evaluation found. I told you the testimony of Dr. Jeffrey Lewin was not favourable to Bryan. It wasn't. Now, we haven't seen the full reports. We haven't seen all that. But it's not favourable to Bryan. Again, she has offered Bryan on a silver platter to the state by presenting that evidence in the filings. What a clown. What a clown. If I believe Bryan Kohberger, if I believed Bryan Kohberger was innocent, I would be furious. I would be furious at his defence. As it is, I'm annoyed by it. I am. I'm annoyed by it because a defence shouldn't be so incompetent that they offer their client, whether they're guilty or not, up to the state. I'm not happy with it at all. I'm not happy with the way that the defence is using Bryan Kohberger's health conditions. I'm really not. It's inappropriate, and there's no basis in law. It will not help him. It will hinder his case more than anything else, because it now leads the state to be able to get their own evaluations of Kohberger, and the defence can't have it both ways. All right. Okay, that's not what his neuropsychological evaluation found. The expert who conducted the evaluation, Dr. Orr, listed developmental coordination disorder under the title diagnoses for which Bryan met criteria in the past. Emphasis added. Dr. Orr clearly explained that motor problems have not impacted his functioning significantly in many years. No, we know they haven't. We know they haven't, because he's a runner. Like Ann Taylor has said in previous filings, that Bryan, like, he's a night owl and he likes to go running at night. That's what she said in previous filing. So if he can run at night when it's dark, and he can run without falling over and, you know, breaking his neck on things, he's not got a coordination problem. I'm sorry, he's not. That he can drive, he can live a normal life. He's not got a massive problem with lack of coordination. Sorry, no. All right. So he fit the criteria for it in the past, but it's not impacted his functioning significantly in many years. To the extent defendant currently has any motor impairment, even according to his own expert. Didn't he do kung fu? I think he did boxing or kickboxing. I don't remember. I'm going to have to go back, and I remember he's been a fitness fanatic though. So, all right. So, according to his own expert, it affects only his fine motor dexterity and vulnerabilities in visual motor function. The examples she uses for fine motor dexterity include when he had poor handwriting and trouble tying his shoes in the past. Well, loads of kids struggle with poor handwriting and tying their shoes. Maybe Bryan struggled a little bit more than most because of his fine motor problems, because, you know, handwriting involves fine motor skills. So I don't think that Bryan would have made a very good surgeon. He wouldn't make a very good bomb disposal officer. But there's absolutely nothing, even if he's got fine motor problems right now, to this very day, that does not preclude him from walking a few yards from where he parked outside of 1122 King Road into the house, and then stabbing 4 people does not involve fine motor dexterity. That's gross motor, like using like your big muscles. That's gross motor, not fine motor. So no. She asserts he continues having difficulty with manipulation of tools even as an adult, but only per parent report. She also points to her observations during the examination that defendant moved his whole arm and repositioned his upper body slightly to manipulate items effectively. No reasonable juror could infer from the observations and the diagnosis applied to the defendant in the past that it was not possible for defendant to commit the crimes in which he is charged. What does this say? Curiously, defendant's other mental health expert, Dr. Ryan, includes developmental coordination disorder as a current condition, even though she defers to Dr. Orr's comprehensive neuropsychological evaluation, which found defendant only met the criteria in the past. Dr. Ryan provides no explanation for a differing opinion. In fact, the phrase developmental coordination disorder appears only a single time in Dr. Ryan's report. On the list of conditions, Dr. Ryan's discussion of defendant's problems with fine motor skills is limited to his educational history, and all her references were observations made more than 2 decades ago. So when he was a kid. More tellingly, neither of defendant's experts drew that of any similar inference. Neither expert offers any opinion on whether any of his coordination made it more or less likely that he was physically capable of committing the crimes charged. Thus, the expert opinions themselves are inadmissible during the guilt phase because they are not relevant to guilt. Exactly. And defendant's attempt to stretch his expert's opinion beyond what they say is barred by Rule 403 as unfairly prejudicial, misleading to the jury, and a waste of time. Yes, thank you. It's a waste of everybody's time. I'd be fuming. If I truly believe Kohberger is innocent, I would be fuming right now. You pro-burgers, I hope you're fuming. Finally, it now appears that the defendant wants to offer evidence that his OCD and ASD are actually physical conditions as opposed to mental conditions. OCD is mental. Look, there's a physical basis for everything we do. There's a physical basis somewhere in the brain for everything we do, everything we think, every emotion we feel. It's either neurological, neurochemical, electrical. It is physical. However, OCD is defined as an anxiety. There used to be anxiety disorders in the old DSMs. They were like forms of anxiety disorder. They have their own disorders now, but they are rooted in anxiety. Autism, though, is a developmental difference. It is a difference in the way that your brain operates. I don't even like using the term disorder for people who have got mild autism like Bryan. Used to be Asperger's. I don't like it where they've taken Asperger's out and now everybody's just autistic. Because the spectrum, the autistic spectrum, is so vast. It goes from the mild end, people like Bryan, all the way up to people who are profoundly disabled. And they're completely different. I don't know why we have this one spectrum. It's weird. Anyhow, that's the way the cookie crumbles. But ASD is not a mental health condition. It's comorbid, like people with autism do sometimes, have anxiety, depression, problems that do affect their mental health, but that's comorbid to the disorder rather than being the actual disorder. God, I feel like I'm doing a psychology lecture. I used to teach this crap. Not that it's crap, it's very interesting, but I used to teach this stuff. Year on year on year on year. All right. Okay, where were we? As stated above, this is new, and the state is attempting to understand how this would be relevant or admissible. We've got text. Bad news. What's bad news? Don't you just annoy? Isn't it just annoying when somebody texts you like 2 words, bad news? Like, what's bad? What's the bad news? What's the bad news? I'll wait for more information. Okay. I am personally glad that the defense corrected the mistake in saying that autism was synonymous with mental defect. Because it's not. The state will note that not having this knowledge before, the state's motion in limine was not drafted to address this. Based on the above, the state asked the court to enter orders in limine as follows: prohibiting the defendant from offering evidence of purported explanations of how it may appear in front of a jury. This is irrelevant and immaterial, thank you. as most likely to appeal to the sympathies of the jury, to mislead and to cause confusion on the real issues in this case, yes, as to whether or not the defendant is guilty of murder and burglary. I agree. I would deny the motion for that I would deny the defence's motion if I was Judge Hippler. Reserving ruling on whether the defendant is entitled to offer rebuttal evidence of his mental condition to the extent it might offer an alternative explanation to any of the state's evidence about the defendant's suspicious and unusual or otherwise odd physical and social behaviours. Deny the defendant's introduction of the newly disclosed evidence regarding physical condition, which was not previously disclosed, nor proffered as rebuttal or the response to state's guilt phase expert disclosure, which on its face does not appear to be relevant or material. Thank you. Thank you. All right. All right. I'm going to move on to the Elantra now. So these are from one of the filings. We're going to read part of it. We used a little bit of it in my last live stream. We used a couple of the diagrams from the filing. It's not one of the newest ones, but I did say I was going to go through the FBI report that's part of that filing, and I will, but for a very specific purpose. I'm not going to go through line by line because some of it, I think some of that minutiae is interesting, but it's not helpful. I mean, it's good that they were rigorous. It's good that, you know, all that surveillance footage was gone through, but I do think that most of what is in these reports will literally be a sentence to the jury. What's most important, what they really need to hammer home to the jury is that it was Bryan's car that was doing the loops around King Road and Queen Road. That's important, not the little turns and how many times he went down this road or that road. To me, I don't care. As we'll see shortly, some of it might not even be Bryan's car. But what is important is that we can be sure, well, we can be sure as possible that the vehicle, the white vehicle very close to King Road, like in the minutes before the murders and in the minutes after the murders, were Bryan's car. All right, so these are the white Elantra caught on various surveillance. So that's a clear one, like the side view. That's showing that there's no front license plate. That's showing the rear. Can't see the license plate though, unfortunately. I can't really tell what that said. Oh, departing third brake light lower window. Okay. I mean, look, that. Does it look like Bryan's car? Kind of. These are clear ones, though. That one's clear. That one's clear. And we also have, let's not forget, we have this Linda Lane footage that was released. Oh, way back. When was this? July the 4th, 2023. This is the video that I did then, July the 4th, 2023. I do have about 20 minutes of this footage in the members area as a members only video, if anybody hasn't seen it. But this was just a little video that I did on it. Kohberger caught on camera, newly released surveillance video analysis. All right. And what's important is this car here. This is Bryan's car. All right. So we're going to play a little bit of this, but what I am pleased about is that we do have all of this, that we've got accurate times, that they've tested the cameras. They know when a camera is accurate to local time or whether it's approximately 5 seconds behind. Like they've literally gone second by second. That's pretty detailed. I mean, compare this type of analysis that the FBI have done to the Delphi case. I mean, it's like night and day. All right, so we've got all these camera times, accurate. So all these different cameras that Bryan's car potentially was caught on. So that's good. I like that. Okay, so these are the sightings. Now, some of these, I don't know whether or not some of these are Bryan's car. I honestly cannot tell whether headlights that shine on a building are Bryan's car. So in my head, I'm kind of discounting some of this. Now, this list, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of cameras, there's a lot of potential for Bryan to, to have been caught on camera, but it doesn't mean to say that every single one of these is Bryan's car. So I hope that they are able to condense this into an easily understandable timeline for the jury. I hope, and it sometimes happens, that a party will get overzealous and will want to include everything, and will just basically bore the jury stiff with information that's less relevant. What is really important is not headlights shining on a building opposite a camera when you can't actually see the car. Because it could be anybody, it could be anything. It could be somebody turning the lights on and they're not driving away. It could be anything. It could be anyone. But the times where the car is clear, that's what we need to focus on. That's what, in my opinion, the state should be concentrating on for, the timeline for the jury. So we start off with him coming into Moscow via Indian Hills Drive. Okay, vehicle matching description. And I'm not going to say, yes, that's Bryan's, or no, that's not Bryan's, without actually having a picture of each of these. And we don't have a picture of each of these. So I'm literally saying, all right, okay, so vehicle matching the description. I can only, but I've only got the FBI's word for this. I would like to see all of this before I could say, yes, that's Bryan's, or no, that's not Bryan's. But to me, it's not even relevant whether all of these are Bryan's. What is important is that the vehicle close to the crime scene, close to the murders and then driving away, that is the important time. I don't care what Bryan was doing at 3:26. That's nearly an hour before the murders. I don't care what he was doing. I don't care. He could have been sitting in a lay-by, I don't know, twiddling his thumbs, filing his nails. He could have been doing anything. I don't care what he was doing. So I don't care whether this car, an hour before the murders, was Bryan or not. And this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, that I think some people are hyper-focusing on certain things and are not really... what you're doing is you're taking the whole grain, right? You're taking the whole grain and you're not sorting the wheat from the chaff. You're not sorting the stuff that's really important, and then everything else you can discard. And I'm not saying that the FBI is wrong for doing any of this. Of course they're not. It's great that all of this information is there. It shows that they've done a comprehensive analysis of the cameras in that area. It shows how many cameras they've been able to access. But does it matter whether some of these are not Bryan? No, it doesn't. It could easily be that there's another car that drives around Indian Hills or drives on Ridge Road and he's a white car, but it's not Bryan's. What is important is that the car outside of King Road before and immediately after the murders, that's the car that the focus needs to be on, So please, sort the wheat from the chaff. With any case, you're going to get a massive amount of data if, the state is releasing as much as is being released at the moment in this case. You've got to sort the wheat from the chaff. Some of the stuff that you get in a discovery packet, some of the stuff that you get in these filings is informational. It's not something that is going to be really important in front of the jury. So that's my opinion. All right, so I'm going to move down. So we've got Main Street. We've got Ridge Road. Now, I know that the defence don't think that the sighting of this vehicle on Ridge Road is Bryan's. I don't care. I don't care. That's nearly an hour before the murders. Well, 40 minutes before the murders. So I don't care whether that car is Bryan's or not. Might not be. So what? I'd like to have a look at the surveillance and give my own little assessment, but it doesn't really matter. So then we've got 1320 Lindell Lane. So this is when he starts doing loops. So he's coming to Moscow and he's going to start doing loops now. And he goes round and round and round and round for, 35, 40 minutes. So he's on Lindell Lane. Now, what we do have is some Lindell Lane footage from one of the cameras on Lindell Lane. So we do have that. But I'm going to show you the clip from 4:05, which is shortly before that car parks up and Bryan goes into the house and commits a quadruple murder. Okay, so 1112 King Road, that's next door. So that captures the car doing like the closest. So that captures the car doing its turns as it's going round. So back to Lindell Lane. Back to one more. Now, these are the issues. These are the issues. Headlights briefly shine on upper exterior of 1127 King Road, indicating a vehicle turning. Look, okay, in context, the fact that this vehicle is doing loops, in context, these headlights that are shining on, opposing buildings, it's likely to be the same car, but I don't care if it isn't. Like, it's not convincing to me to say, oh, we know the car's there because of these headlights. There's reasonable doubt there that could be something else. So let's focus on the stuff that can actually be identified as a white Elantra. So 1112 King Road again. Westbound on Queen Road. So that's right in front of the house. So going westbound on Queen Road, right in front of the house, and then turns north onto King Road. So we know that in this instance at 3:33, they've seen the vehicle and then the headlights shining on trees. It's likely to be the same car, isn't it? It's likely that the headlights are likely to be from the car that they've just seen turning. So again, headlights, and I don't care. Again, I don't care where he goes. I don't care how many loops he does. I don't care where he goes. I don't care how long it takes him. I don't care if he parks up. He might park up for like 5 minutes or 5 seconds. We don't know. We don't know how fast he was going. So when people are like looking at maps and saying, well, it's taking him this long to go this far and this long to go this far, we don't know how fast he's going. It's not relevant. What is relevant is, it's relevant that he was in the area. All right. And he's dithering about. What's he waiting for? Is he plucking up courage? Is he waiting for lights to turn off? What's he doing? We don't know what he's doing. But one thing he is doing is getting himself caught on a whole lot of cameras. So it'd have been way better just to get into the area and just sit there. Like, park his car somewhere quiet and walk to King Road and sit there and wait. This is insane. This is somebody who is wanting to get caught, but thinking they're clever. Like, you know, how many cameras are out? And he should know this. He should know this as a criminal justice student. So this is just silly. Like, what he did here is just silly. But again, I don't care if some of these things, like the headlights seen on Elantra Drive, I don't really care whether that's his car or not. What I care about is the cameras immediately, like, close to the crime scene. So vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 travels east on Queen Road. So again, that's passing the house along the north side of 500 Queen Road. Those are the apartments to the east of the house. Vehicle turns south along the east side of the building and turns west along the south side of the building. So again, it's doing this little loop. Vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 exits the frame, traveling west in the direction of the victim's residence. So this is getting more relevant now. So again, headlights. So it's like round and round and round those couple of streets. It's creepy as hell. So it keeps doing that, keeps doing that, keeps doing that. As we know, we've known this since the PCA. But it's kind of good that we've got all this detail. $57. Headlights again, not interested. Okay, so 358, vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 travels west on Queen Road, turns north on King Road. So again, it's travelled past the front of the house, has turned onto King Road. So it's going to do one more loop. All right, so this is very close now. This is very close now. So 405, vehicle matching the description, pulls partially into the east side parking lot of the 500 Queen Road apartment buildings from the north side of the buildings, moving east. The vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 then completes a 3-point turn and returns westbound along the north side of the apartment buildings. Headlights are visible in the window reflection as well as on the exterior, indicating the vehicle is facing west. And then vehicle matching the description travels west on Queen Road. So it's gone past the house and then it's caught on this camera. So again, the next door camera doing a 3-point turn. Oh, sorry, a U-turn at the intersection, and then goes past the house again, and then gets caught on the camera of Queen Road again. So these are the important points here. These are the important points, not the route he took to get there, not the amount of loops he's done even. This is the important point. So this white Elantra was visible on these different cameras, and they know to the second, they know to the absolute second what time this was. Like, they knew that one camera was 5 seconds out. I mean, that's pretty good investigation. Okay, so there's no subsequent vehicle activity captured for approximately 13 minutes after these headlights are seen. So that's 4:07. So he's parked by, I think he parks, so where the house is, just to the, you turn right. So instead of going into the parking lot at the back, I think he just parks at the side. So he can make a uber quick getaway. So he doesn't have to reverse. He doesn't have to, fiddle about, he can just drive away. And then at 4:20 and 47 seconds, a vehicle matching the description travels westbound on Queen Road at a high rate of speed, turning north onto King Road. And then he's out. He's gone. And then they don't catch him on cameras when he's going into the wilds. They pick him up via his phone because he turns his phone back on. And then the next cameras he's on, he's back in Pullman. And then they've got the stuff from the day after when he goes down south, I think discarding stuff. But he's all the way south in Clarkston. So it's pretty good investigation. And this is the footage that came out July. So this was leaked July 4th. Happy Independence Day, 2023. All right, so we see the time here. And I'm just going to take it back a few seconds. So you can see this, the headlights here. And I'm going to stop it when you see the car here. And it's absolutely the same car as this. You can tell it's the same car. And that's what's important. Okay. I'm just going to take it back a few more seconds. I'm going to slow it down as well. All right, I'm going to put it on 0.5. Take it back a little bit more. All right, so you're going to see the lights coming in and it's going to travel this way. Watch it. It's going to get to about here. You can see it through the fence. Right there. There. There's the windows. Top of the car. You can tell it's white. So remember, I've got this on 0.5 speed. So it parks there for a little minute. And he's backing up. And you can clearly see that is a white car that looks very, very, very like a white Elantra. So you turn around and right. And that's 406. 406. It's caught a bunch of times going round, but you can't really see it. It's only when it comes up here that you see that it is a white car, and it looks a lot like an Elantra to me. So just play it one more time. So when it's here. Whoa. Oh, that's me zooming in. That's the thing on the video, not me today. there. Hold on, I'm going to put it back to this one. So 405, almost 406. So this is like literally a minute before he parks up for the last time and goes in and murders 4 people. So there you can see it really clearly there. Really clearly. And that's the thing that you need to focus on. Sorting the wheat from the chaff is really important. All of the rest of it's interesting. It shows that they've done a good investigation. You know, it shows that they've gone and tested all the cameras. They know that these times are right to the second. However, what's really important, that you know, the real meat, the prime cut, if you will, I say this as a vegan, is the fact that this car is right there, and literally a minute before parks up for the final time. Then 30 minutes later comes out and disappears at a fast rate of speed. That looks a lot like Bryan Kohberger's car, a lot like it. And then we've got the DNA in the house that is 100% match for Bryan Kohberger. Those are the things I think that the jury are most important things. Not that the other stuff isn't important, it's all important. Like the totality of the evidence put together gives the whole picture. But the real important stuff, the real crucial stuff, is that Bryan Kohberger, he can be pinned to outside of the house shortly before and shortly after, and inside the house with his DNA on the knife sheath. There you go. It's too dark to tell what colour it is. The fact that other colours can come up white. Yeah, true. We know it. Well, all right, let's put it this way. It's a light coloured car, and it looks a lot like the shape of Bryan Kohberger's white Elantra. Let's put it that way. DoorDash delivered at 3:59. So DoorDash delivered. And what I hope they do is they put everything together in a timeline, like including everything. So the jury don't have to piece it all together, that it's everything. So DoorDash delivers at 3:59. So at 3:58 and 23, vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 travels west on Queen Road and turns north onto King Road. All right, let's just get the map up here. All right, so here's the house right here, like nestled in the corner. That's so that's King Road. This is Taylor Avenue. So the frat house is up here somewhere. So then you've got King Road. This is Queen Road. Oh, why will it not let me go up? Why would I not let me go up Queen Road? That's weird. Used to. Pretty sure it used to. Let you go up Queen Road. They changed it. Google changed it for privacy purposes. I think it's a bit late for that, honestly. But they have. You can't go up Queen Road anymore. Huh. Weird. Weird, weird, weird. All right, so. Woo. Woohoo. Where's my pin gone? All right. So it's going west on Queen Road, going this way. And then it turns north up King Road. So that's 358. Now, DoorDash delivers at 359. So I'd be interested to know where DoorDash comes from. Because, you know, I've been thinking, surely DoorDash must have... I've been hoping that DoorDash would have caught the Elantra on their dash cam. Or at least saw the car. I'd be interested. Now, we've not heard that they have as of yet. That doesn't mean that they haven't. It's just not been relevant to put it in a filing as of yet. So I am looking forward to knowing what the DoorDash person saw. But as the DoorDash was arriving, the Elantra was turning north up King Road. So 358 and 23 turns north onto King Road. Headlights can be seen shining on the tree to the west of the intersection of Queen Road and Taylor, indicating the vehicle turned west. Okay. So turned west onto Taylor. And then it's going to have to do another loop. So maybe the car went this way and DoorDash came this way. So maybe DoorDash didn't see him. But the Elantra was right there when the DoorDash was. But it is possible. So 359 and 4 headlights traveling south on Malenta. So assuming that is the Elantra and not just some random headlights, then again, I'm not putting on much stock in headlights, but the fact that the Elantra was seen on a camera going west and then north, it makes sense that the headlights along here would be the same car. It makes sense. So I'm wondering whether the Elantra was just out of the vision. Like if DoorDash came from this way and the Elantra went this way, so DoorDash would have been coming up here and then turned down here, and the Elantra had just gone this way. Don't know. That's something we're going to have to wait and see. Wait and see about. So 407. So vehicle matching the description. Where's the 405 that we've seen before? There, that's what we've just watched. That's what we've just watched. 405 and 31. Vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 pulls partially into the east side parking lot of the 500 Queen Road apartment buildings. From the north side of the buildings, moving east, the vehicle matching the description of vehicle 1 then completes a 3-point turn and returns westbound along the north side of the apartment buildings. That's what we've just watched. That's what's caught. And that clearly was a light-coloured car that looked a lot like Bryan Kohberger's Elantra. And then at 4:07, vehicle matching the description travels east. Again, it does that loop. And then it travels south along the east side of the building and then turns west along the south side of the building. Vehicle matching the description exits the frame, traveling west in the direction of the victim's residence. And then got headlights and then no subsequent activity at all for the next 13 minutes. No proof of it, though. No, there's not. But how many other vehicles that look identical to Bryan Kohberger's were driving around that night, who also happened to drive away at 4:20? There's no activity whatsoever on any of the cameras during the 13 minutes when the murders were happening. And then that camera picks up the same car speeding away. And inside the house, oh, look, there's Bryan Kohberger's DNA. That's pretty convincing. That's pretty convincing. I'd be convinced by that. Given that there's a bunch of other evidence that surrounds it. Each piece of that other evidence on its own doesn't feed you the story. But put it all together, then you've got almost a complete picture. Not quite. But when in any crime do we have the complete picture? Unless the killer wants to confess all and tells the truth. Occasionally that happens. Occasionally, only occasionally, because usually confessions, there's some kind of exaggeration or lie or something, or it's false stuff going on. But we've got almost a complete picture. I think we've got as complete a picture as we can do based on the information we know so far. And to me, I've not seen any evidence that completely outs Kohberger as the killer. Or what the evidence I see at the moment supports the fact he's the killer. Some of it I think is neutral. Some of it I don't know. Like headlights on a building. I don't know. But focus on the important stuff. Focus on the big stuff. And there's enough of the picture, in my opinion, to say, yeah, I think they got the man. I do think they got the man. Neutral equals reasonable doubt. No, neutral means at this moment in time, I'm not going to classify it. So things like headlights on a building, I'm not going to classify that until I see the actual footage. So does it make sense that those headlights caught on a building seconds after the vehicle turns? The chances are it is the same vehicle, but I want to see that footage. So it's neutral for that reason. Either I don't have enough information or it's not directly relevant. Stuff that's not directly relevant doesn't bother me. It doesn't go into any category. So it's not in reasonable doubt at all. Neutral does not equal reasonable doubt. Neutral equals either you've not categorized it yet or it's not directly relevant. So the stuff that happened at 3:30, as I said earlier, I don't care. I don't care what route he took to come into Moscow. I don't care. I don't care what he was doing, where he was in the hour before. So I'm neutral about this one. I'm neutral about all of these. I don't care whether that's Bryan's car or not. because it's too far away from the actual time of the murders. It's neutral. I don't care if it's Bryan's car. I don't care if it isn't Bryan's car. What I care about is the vehicle that is doing the circles like a stalking weirdo around Queen Road, doing those loops. That's when I start caring. And I start caring because that vehicle that's captured shortly before and then immediately after looks very much like Bryan Kohberger's white Elantra. And then for 13 minutes while the murders were happening, while Kohberger was inside, and we know he was inside because he left his DNA on the knife sheath inside, there was no activity whatsoever. So there was no other vehicles moving around during the time of the murders. That's important. That's very important. So it seems that only his car was doing those loops. Oh, so now it doesn't matter if it was his car. It matters very much. It doesn't matter. At 3:30, this is almost an hour before the murders. I don't care whether this vehicle here on Indian Hills Drive is Bryan Kohberger's car or not. I don't care. What I care about is whether this car that's doing the loops, like doing the loops like here, and then it goes up here, and then it goes round here, and then it's back here, and it goes round here. I care about that car. I care about that car because that car looks like Bryan Kohberger's. That's what I care about. I don't care about the car. I don't even care about the car that they see in Pullman at 5:25, 5:29. I don't care. Likely it's Kohberger going home, but I don't care if it isn't. Because if you can prove to me that that isn't Bryan Kohberger's car at 5:29 in Pullman, it doesn't tell me that Bryan Kohberger wasn't at King Road murdering 4 people between 4:07 and 4:20. What time are the murders? Between 4:07 and 4:20. 4:07 and 4:20. We know that the car parks up for the final time after doing all these loops at 4:07. There's no activity whatsoever in that neighborhood for 13 minutes. And then at 4:20, that vehicle is seen speeding away. So I don't care whether you can prove to me that Bryan Kohberger wasn't arriving home at 5:29. Don't care. All I care about was it Bryan Kohberger doing the loops in his Elantra, parks up at 4:07, and then murders people horrendously, leaving his DNA on the knife sheath, and then speeds away at 4:20. That's what's important. Not whether his car left some headlights on a building streets away. Don't care. Prove that it is, not prove that it isn't. I've never said prove that it isn't. I've said I don't care. Like the vehicles that are seen on cameras an hour before or 2 hours after, I don't care whether you can prove to me or not whether they're Bryan's car. I don't care whether you can prove it is. I don't care whether you can prove it isn't. All I care about, all anyone should care about really, all the jury will want to know about is, was it Bryan's car? Can you prove it was Bryan's car? Doing those circles between, up to 4:07, and then 13 minutes later is seen speeding away. No, I said I don't care. Just said it 2 minutes ago. No, I said I don't care whether you can prove whether it is or it isn't Bryan's car at, let's say, 5:29 coming into Pullman. I don't care whether you can prove that or not. What I care about is, was it Bryan's car at 4:07 parking up here and then speeding away at 4:20? And what I can see with my own eyeballs on this footage right here, hold on a minute, let me... This footage right here, find the right spot again. I can tell with my own eyeballs that this looks like Bryan Kohberger's car. When it arrives. That's what I care about. Whose DNA is under Maddie's fingernails? Kaylee's and inconclusively Bryan's. But it's inconclusive, so we don't know. I want to talk about these dopey women who love Bryan. I don't. I mean, look, you know, people have all sorts of problems in their life. People have mental health problems and fall in love with serial killers all the time. For some reason, I don't really understand it, but there you go. So I'm not going to say anything about them. I don't care about them. That looks like a white Elantra to me. With my own eyeballs, I can see that looks like a white Elantra. Could it be an identical car to Bryan's? Yeah, it could be. And Bryan is the unluckiest man in the world. The killer had a car identical to Bryan's and also had DNA identical to Bryan's as well. So unless you can prove to me that Bryan Kohberger has an identical twin that no one knows about, who drives an identical car to a white Elantra, who was there in Moscow, Idaho, and actually committed the murders instead of Bryan, if you can prove to me that that's the case, then I'll listen to you. So does Bryan have an identical twin who happened to be in Moscow, Idaho on the same night? If so, does that identical twin to Bryan's have a white car that looks very much like Bryan Kohberger's white Elantra? If so, I'll listen to you. You can't see any vehicle in that blurry footage. Right there. You see it driving in. So either get an eye test or admit to yourself that you actually do see the car. It does look like Bryan's car, but you don't want to acknowledge that. So you see it driving in, you see its lights, and then you see it right there. I'm going to stop it when it comes in. And my eyes are shocking, and I can see it with my own eyeballs. Right there. Right there. Do you want me to screenshot it? Let me screenshot it. It'll look pixelated. But can't tell any kind of model. Okay, cool. Good for you. All right. Right there. Boop, 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 boop. It's got that sloping back window. It's a shame you can't see that driver, isn't it? Shame you can't see that driver. So exactly the right shape, light colored car. So again, prove to me that Bryan Kohberger has got an identical twin who has a car that looks like a white Elantra, and I'll listen, because that is reasonable doubt. That is true reasonable doubt. That is true reasonable doubt. Prove to me that Bryan is driving that car. Well, We can't prove that Bryan is driving that car. What we can prove is that Bryan was inside that house. So if that's not Bryan driving that car, how did Bryan get there and how did Bryan get away if it's not Bryan driving that car? So it doesn't take a genius, you know, a logistician to work out that Bryan was inside that house. Bryan was in possession of the murder weapon because he left the sheath behind. So if that's not Bryan in the car, how did Bryan get there and how did Bryan get away? And the fact that Bryan has a white Elantra that he's seen right there doing the loops around the crime scene, logic would inform you that that is actually Bryan and that's how he got away. Anyhow, I'll leave it there for today. Leave it there for today. I've been on here over 2 hours. Don't like to go much longer than that. Can we prove that he was inside the house? Yes, we can prove he was inside the house, Miss Wales. We can prove he was inside the house. We can prove it. I talked about touch DNA in my last live stream. Go and check it out. But yes, Bryan was inside that house. Don't be fooled by people saying, oh, you can get touch DNA from everywhere. Go and watch the live stream that I did the other day. And I explain why that is Bryan Kohberger's DNA. It's not just been transferred, second hand, third hand, or whatever. I explain it. Go and check it out. All right, guys. Thank you for joining me. I didn't get any donations, but the Quiet Observer was a member for 10 months. So that's good stuff. And yeah, thanks for joining me. Thanks, mods. And I'm going to maybe go and enjoy the last of the day. If it's still nice outside, I might go for a little walk. Maybe. All right, guys. Enjoy the rest of yours. I'll see you soon. Bye.